America in the 1950s had many frontiers in civil rights, like the Montgomery bus boycott and others like it. Anger came when the murder of a black teenager went public, opening the eyes of many who avoided activism. The murder of Emmett Till is an example of those frontiers. The verdict of his trial magnified racism in America, creating a reaction of protest, activism, and togetherness in the black community. The American Civil Rights Movement made bills after the verdict, becoming one of the largest American civil rights frontiers. In 1913, Woodrow Wilson became President of the United States. After assuming office, he made it mandatory that federal employees had to be segregated by race. This mandate led to wage cuts for people of color working in any service position. These wage cuts led to a significant income inequality for employees of color. This surprised a lot of black voters, as President Wilson had promised quite the opposite during his campaign. In fact, he had promised equal treatment. On the 30th of May, 1921, a black teenager named Dick Rowland entered an elevator in an office building in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was reported by the Tulsa Tribune that Rowland had sexually assaulted a white woman named Sarah Page, the elevator operator, after being arrested the same morning. A white mob demanded that the sheriff hand Rowland over for them to deal with, and the police had to barricade Rowland at the top floor to protect him. Just 2 days later, a white mob of rioters ransacked and burned the Greenwood district. The governor declared martial law. Firefighters and guardsmen then worked together to put out the fires and started arresting black Tulsans. An estimated 6,000 people were kept at the convention hall and the fairgrounds for up to 8 days. More than 800 people were injured, with an estimated 300 deaths. This is known as the Tulsa Massacre. The NAACP's anti-lynching campaign, circa 1931, started by Walter Francis White, the NAACP's president from 1929 until 1955. The campaign was started to bring awareness to lynchings, in hopes to stop them and the crime's committers. A flag was flown outside the NAACP's headquarters that read, "A man was lynched yesterday," circa 1930, but was later taken down due to threats of losing the lease. Emmett Till was a black teenager who was abducted, tortured, and murdered on August 28, 1955, after being accused of harassing a white woman. His body was found in the Tallahatchie River, unrecognizable from his torture wounds, only recognizable by his father's ring that he was wearing. Carolyn Bryant, the white woman who had accused Emmett Till of harassing her at a grocery store, some witnesses say he was dared by his friends to do so, saying he grabbed her waist, whistled at her, grabbed her wrist, or flirted with her. After telling her husband, he and his half-brother abducted, tortured, and killed Emmett Till. Roy Bryant, Carolyn Bryant's husband, and his half-brother J.W. Millam, the men who abducted, tortured, killed, and threw Emmett Till in the Tallahatchie River.
Well, they took him from the house. They drove him to another half-brother's farm, a barn in Glendora, Mississippi.
They were arrested the following day for the abduction.
I think it was Big Milam who took the hatchet and came down over Bo's head and separated the facial part from the back part. And then he had the nerve to take his gun and shoot him through the temple area. And I know he was dead by then. I know he was.
After Till's body was found on August 31st, 1955, they were also charged with his murder and waited only 4 weeks to go to trial. Mamie Till Mobley, Emmett's mother, demanded that Emmett have an open casket to showcase the blatant racism that caused his murder. Quote, "I think everyone needed to know what had happened to Emmett Till." Unquote. Emmett's funeral lasted 3 days, with an estimate of 50,000 attendees. Till's mortician, Harry Case, offered to, quote, "touch up," unquote, Till's body for the funeral. Mamie Till Mobley declined, quote, "let the people see what they did to my boy," unquote. As his mother expected, the decision to have an open casket made his murder one of the most notorious moments in the American Civil Rights Movement.
They said that about 1 in every 5 had to be assisted out of the building. They would just go into a faint.
I think black people's reaction was so visceral Everybody knew we were under attack. And that attack was symbolized by the attack on a 14-year-old boy.
His funeral was covered almost exclusively by black-centered media outlets. For example, it was covered by Jet magazine. Jet magazine published the pictures of Emmett's mutilated body in an issue that shocked its customers.
But they did a workout on his head. Have you seen the Jet magazine photo? You have. Well, if you notice that photo, you will see where you can see where the undertaker sewed him back together. Yeah, but you have to know that he was separated to know to really assess the significance of those stitches.
It's said that this gained support and sympathy from people, no matter their race. After the funeral, people started protesting more and more for justice for Emmett Till. Quote, "When people saw what happened to my son, men stood up who had never stood up before. People became vocal who had never vocalized before." Unquote. When it came time for his trial, an all-white, all-male jury was chosen. Many say that the evidence against Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam was more than enough to convict them, but only the jury could decide in the long run. The jury deliberated for only an hour before coming back. The verdict was given. Bryant and Millam were acquitted of all charges and returned home, free to go. Just a few months after the murder of Emmett Till, a civil rights activist named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus to a white man. Quote, "I thought about Emmett Till, and I could not go back. My legs and feet were not hurting. That is a stereotype. I paid the same fare as others, and I felt violated. I was not going back." Unquote. She was arrested, which led to the Montgomery bus boycott, another one of the most well-known civil rights movements in American history. Mamie Till Mobley passed away on January 6, 2003. She lived a long life, and though not by choice initially, became a civil rights activist for her son Emmett Till. She was a huge part of this case, the reason it became so widely known. She pushed for the open casket, and if she had not, the world may not have had the knowledge it has today on what happened to Emmett Till. The Emmett Till Legacy Foundation, quote, "Founded in 2005, ETLF is a 501c3 nonprofit organization committed to preserving the memory and legacy of Emmett Lewis Till, July 25, 1941 through August 28, 1955, and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley's hope for justice, and that his death will not be in vain." Unquote. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, proposed in 2021 by its sponsor, Rep. Bobby Rush, and approved on March 29, 2022. This bill makes lynching a federal offense. If harm is inflicted upon a person because of their race, they can be charged with lynching and imprisoned for up to 30 years. Quote, "It's not exactly like Jim Crow, but when you have confessed murderers go free, a sham of legal process, and people not being held accountable, when we reflect back, we're seeing things that are very similar." Unquote. In conclusion, the murder of Emmett Till was, and still is, one of the most important frontiers in the American civil rights movement. This is proven by the impact that his legacy had, and still has, on combating racism in America. From protests that filled entire city blocks to bills made in his name, the effect that Emmett's story had on America continues to be seen even today. Till's funeral was a wake-up call for thousands. It's safe to say that his story has given people a voice, even in some of the darkest times of oppression.